Dave looked up, peering at me over a pair of horn-rimmed glasses. I had the thick acetate of the Robert Johnson record in my hands, and I asked Van Ronk if he ever heard of him. Dave said nope, he hadn't, and I put it on the record player so we could listen to it. From the first note, the vibrations from the loudspeaker made my hair stand up. The stabbing sounds from the guitar could almost break a window. When Johnson started singing, he seemed like a guy who could have sprung from the head of Zeus in full armour. I immediately differentiated between him and anyone else I had ever heard. The songs weren't customary blues songs. They were perfected pieces, each song containing 4 or 5 verses, every couplet intertwined with the next, but in no obvious way. They were so utterly fluid. At first, they went by quick, too quick to even get. They jumped all over the place in range and subject matter, short, punchy verses that resulted in some panoramic story, fires of mankind blasting off the surface of this spinning piece of plastic. Kind-hearted woman, travelling riverside blues, come on in my kitchen. Johnson's voice and guitar were ringing the room, and I was mixed up in it. Didn't see how anybody couldn't be, but Dave wasn't. He kept pointing out that this song comes from another song, and that one song was an exact replica of a different song. He didn't think Johnson was very original. I knew what he meant, but I thought just the opposite. I thought Johnson was as original as could be. Didn't think him or his songs could be compared to anything. Dave later played some sides by Leroy Carr and Skip James and Henry Thomas and said, "See what I mean?" I did see what he meant, but Woody had taken a lot of old Carter family songs and put his own spin on them too, so I didn't think much of whatever it meant. Dave thought Johnson was okay, but the guy was powerful, but that it was all derivative. There was no point in arguing with Dave, not intellectually anyway. I had a primitive way of looking at things, and I liked country fair politics. My favourite politician was Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater, who reminded me of Tom Mix, and there wasn't any way to explain that to anybody. I wasn't that comfortable with all the psycho-pomlic babble. It wasn't my particular feast of food. Even the current news made me nervous. I liked old news better. All the new news was bad. It was good that it didn't have to be in your face all day. 24-hour news coverage would have been a living hell. I let Dave go back to his newspaper, said I'd see him later, and put the acetate back in the white cardboard sleeve. It wasn't a printed cover. The only identification was written by hand on the disc itself, and what it said was simply the name Robert Johnson, and a listing of the songs. The record that didn't grab Dave very much had left me numb, like I'd been hit by a tranquilizer bullet. Later, at my West 4th Street apartment, I put the record on again and listened to it all by myself. Didn't want to play it for anybody else. Over the next few weeks, I listened to it repeatedly, cut after cut, one song after another, sitting staring at the record player. Whenever I did, it felt like a ghost had come into the room, a fearsome apparition. The songs were layered with a startling economy of lines. Johnson masked the presence of more than 20 men. I fixated on every song and wondered how Johnson did it. Songwriting for him was some highly sophisticated business. The compositions seemed to come right out of his mouth and not his memory, and I started meditating on the construction of the verses, seeing how different they were from Woody's. Johnson's words made my nerves quiver like piano wires. They were so elemental in meaning and feeling, and gave you so much of the inside picture. It's not that you could sort out every moment carefully, because you can't. There are too many missing terms and too much dual existence. Johnson bypasses tedious descriptions that other blues writers would have written whole songs about. There's no guarantee that any of his lines either happened, were said, or even imagined. When he sings about icicles hanging on a tree, it gives me the chills. About milk turning blue, it made me nauseous, and I wondered how he did that. Also, all the songs had some weird personal resonance. Throwaway lines like, "If today were Christmas Eve and tomorrow were Christmas Day." I could feel that in my bones, that particular Yuletide time of the year. On the Iron Range, it had been positively Dickensian. Just like the picture books. Angels on Christmas trees, horse-drawn sleighs pushing through snowy streets, pine trees glistening with lights, wreaths strung over the downtown stores, Salvation Army band playing on the corner, choirs going from house to house caroling, fireplaces blazing, woolly scarves around your neck, church bells ringing. When December rolled around, everything slowed down. Everything got silent and retrospective. Snowy white, deep snow. I always thought Christmas was like that for everyone, everywhere. I couldn't imagine it not being like that forever. Johnson conjured up that in just a few swift strokes, like nothing else, not even the great white Christmas. Everything for Johnson is legitimate prey. There's a fishing song called Dead Shrimp Blues. Unlike anything you could expect, a screwed-up fishing song with red-blooded lines that's way beyond metaphor. There's one about a terraplane, a clunker of an automobile, probably the greatest car song. If you'd never seen a terraplane and heard the song, you'd think it was a streamlined and bullet-shaped. Johnson's car song is way beyond metaphor too. I copied Johnson's words down on scraps of paper so I could examine them closely, the lyrics and patterns, the construction of his old-style lines and the free association that he used, the sparkling allegories, big-ass truths wrapped in hard shell of nonsensical abstraction, themes that flew through the air with the greatest of ease. I didn't have any of these dreams or thoughts, but I was going to acquire them. I thought about Johnson a lot, wondered who his audience could have been. It's hard to imagine sharecroppers or plantation field hands at hop joints relating to songs like these. You have to wonder if Johnson was playing for an audience that only he could see. One off in the future. "The stuff I got'll bust your brains out," he sings. Johnson is serious, like the scorched earth. There's nothing clownish about him, or his lyrics. I wanted to be like that too. Eventually, the record came out, and it hit all the blues lovers like an explosion. A few researchers got transfixed on him and went looking for his past, whatever was left of it, and a few found it. Johnson recorded in the 30s, and in the 1960s, there were still some folks around in the Delta who had known about him, some even who knew him. There'd been a fast-moving story going around that he had sold his soul to the devil at a four-way crossroads at midnight, and that's how he got to be so good. Well, I don't know about that. The ones who knew him told a different tale, and that was that he had hung around some old blues players in the rural parts of Mississippi, played harmonica, was rejected as a bothersome kid, that he went off and learned how to play guitar from a farmhand named Ike Zinneman, a mysterious character, not in any of the history books. Maybe because he didn't make records. He must have been an incredible teacher. Those who knew said that Ike showed Robert the rudiments of how to play, like just about anybody, and that Johnson did the rest on his own. That he mainly listened to records and got all of his approaches off those records. You can still hear them, the original records, the songs that were prototypes for all of Johnson's songs. This makes more sense. Johnson even got a song called Phonograph Blues, that's a homage to a record player with a rusty needle. John Hammond had told me that he thought Johnson had read Walt Whitman. Maybe he did, but it doesn't clear up anything. I just couldn't imagine how Johnson's mind could go in and out of so many places. He seems to know about everything. He even throws in a Confucius-like sayings whenever it suits him. Neither forlorn or hopeless or shackled, nothing hinders him. As great as the greats were, he goes one step further. You can't imagine him singing Washington's Bourgeois Town. He wouldn't have noticed, or if he did, it would have been irrelevant. More than 30 years later, I would see Johnson for myself in 8 seconds worth of 8mm film shot in Ruleville, Mississippi, on a brightly lit afternoon, street by some Germans in the late 30s. Some people questioned whether it was really him, but slowing the 8 seconds down so it was more like 80 seconds, you can see that it really is Robert Johnson. Has to be. Couldn't be anybody else. He's playing with huge, spider-like hands, and they magically move over the strings of his guitar. There's a harp rack with a harmonica around his neck. He looks nothing like a man of stone. No high-strung temperament. He's almost childlike, an angelic-looking figure, innocent as can be. He's wearing a white linen jumper, coveralls, and an unusual gilded cap like little Lord Fauntleroy. He looks nothing like a man with a hellhound on his trail. He looks immune to human dread, and you stare at the image in disbelief.